We often tell you stories of farmers who were raised on the farm, many of whom can trace agriculture in their family, well, as far back as records allow. There are others who are just beginning that legacy on the farm and planting new traditions for the future generations. This week, TWILA's Karl Wiggers introduces us to a Northeast Louisiana man who blends those two narratives into his very own Louisiana farm life.
Riding through the rolling bluffs that surround his farm, Butch Oaks is right at home. For 28 years, he has grown poultry and Angus cattle on his ranch in Ouachita Parish. But unlike many of Louisiana's multi-generation farmers, Butch says that his path to agriculture was just a little bit different.
I'm what you'd call a skip-a-generation farmer. My grandparents in Oklahoma had a wheat farm. My grandparents in Louisiana at one time actually grew cotton on the hills where we are now. As a child, if you wanted to make a little spending money, I could get on my bicycle and ride to any of about 25 dairies in this area, all of them raising 25 to 40 cows and milking. And almost all of those farms also had one 5,000 head chicken house on them.
Those farms are where Butch learned to work hard, but it was his grandmother who led him to what would become his lifelong passion.
I had a desire to show cows, and my grandmother bought me my first Angus heifer. I just fell in love with them.
This was the start of his love for Angus cattle, a love that even a career as an electrical contractor could not shake.
That came easy to me. My dad was a radio technician, and I just grew up around that thought process.
While Butch was successful in that career, he yearned to come back to what he loved during his childhood.
One day I just wanted to come back to raising cattle. And the only way I felt I could afford it was to build some chicken houses that would guarantee me an income and allow me to raise cattle the way I wanted and the kind of cattle I wanted.
Which was naturally?
Which was Angus.
These poultry houses he built look a lot different than the ones that he worked in as a child.
Those chickens were fed by hand, they were watered by hand. Those dairy cows' feed was mixed by hand and carried in buckets and dumped over in a trough.
From 5-gallon buckets to 20,000-pound bins, today his chicken farms run on a totally different scale. Inside these 6 houses, Butch raises more than 125,000 chickens every 6 weeks. Multiply that by 6.5 flocks a year, and that's a whole lot of chicken. Managing that wouldn't be possible without embracing the technology available to him today.
We have computers running the environment in our poultry houses. We have automatic feeders. We have automatic waterers.
His chicken houses even call him sometime when something needs attention. Literally, a chicken house calls him.
Communicator active. Alarm, please press 1 to listen.
This technology is one way that Butch is finding new solutions for old problems. Returning to the farm also gave Butch the chance to revisit his days in the show ring, where he found a new way to share his old love of cattle.
My love of cattle, especially show cattle, was fed by my grandmother buying me that first heifer. My youngest daughter came along, and she would look at pictures in my grandmother's house of me showing cattle. All of a sudden one day she says to me, I want to show cows.
Butch said it was his job to put Kristen in the ring with the very best calves that he could. Then it was up to Kristen to show them well, and they both held up their end of the bargain. From Denver to Baltimore, they traveled the country showing cattle and brought home many champion banners. Many, many champion banners.
Well, here was LSU Grand Champion Bull. We won this 5 years in a row.
Win or lose, Butch said it was in those arenas where Kristen learned valuable skills that outlived her days showing cattle.
They will take that and become a more productive person. And I feel like if there wasn't anything accomplished with my daughter, that was one of the most important things. And the fact that she didn't leave agriculture. She stayed in agriculture and is still in agriculture today.
There's one more way that Butch Oaks has brought something from the past up to the present, and it doesn't really involve the farm that much, but it's super interesting to me. Butch Oaks loves to work on his hot rods that fill his garage, and we talked a lot about those because they are awesome. I've got some of that part of the story on our Facebook page as a TWILA Extra, and you can go and find that on our website at twilatv.org. And Avery, I've got to say, you know, we hear from Kristen all the time when anytime there's a cattle story, a beef story, a dairy story, any kind of a story that involves a four-legged large cow,
Something of the bovine.
anything in the bovine world,
Yeah.
her love for the Angus, and she gets it honest. I'll say that. Butch loves his Angus breed from whenever he was 9 and he got his first, all the way until today. He just being out there with him amongst his Angus herd is, I mean, he's just a kid in a candy shop with those Angus bulls, and his bulls are his babies.
Well, you definitely see where Kristen gets her love for agriculture from her dad, from the family. But I almost wish that she were here instead of over in her garden. However, when we started planning to do this story, it was supposed to be a surprise for Kristen.
It was.
She wasn't supposed to know a thing about it, and then we were going to spring it on her on set.
Yeah, that doesn't really work very well. 'Cause as you can probably guess by the relationship from the story, they're pretty tight. They have a pretty special bond through their love of the Angus cattle, but their showing days as well. They spent a lot of hours together, the two of them, and that was pretty neat to hear those stories from Butch about, you know, raising Kristen in the show barn.
And I want to give one other little TWILA extra, and that is when Karl called Butch to set up the story. I think you left a message, and then he immediately texted Kristen. Is that how it worked?
I called Butch. Apparently, Butch called Kristen. Kristen called me to set it up. That's kind of the way things work there. Butch called a PR person to work with this PR person.
Well, that's the way it works sometimes. Thank you very much, Karl Wiggers.